therapist asked me why I kept dreaming about strangers. Not people I'd met, but faces I'd never seen. Men, women, children who appeared in my sleep with the same desperate message. Please, remember me. Dr. Patricia Whitmore sat across from me in her Arlington office, pen hovering over her notepad. She'd been my therapist for 6 months, ever since the dreams started making me afraid to sleep. "Tell me about last night," she said. A woman, mid-30s, red hair in a braid. She was standing in what looked like a grocery store, but nobody could see her. She kept touching people's shoulders, trying to get their attention. But they walked right through her like she wasn't there. I rubbed my eyes. She looked at me and said, "Please remember me. Tell someone I existed." Dr. Whitmore set down her pen. "Harper, I need to ask you something unusual. Have you been contacted by anyone from the government recently?" "What?" "I'm required by law to report certain patterns. The dreams you're describing match a specific profile. Someone will want to speak with you." That someone arrived 3 days later. 2 agents in dark suits, nothing like the black SUVs you see in movies, just a plain Ford sedan parked outside my apartment building on Grace Street. They didn't show badges or introduce themselves properly. They just handed me a manila folder. Inside were photographs. 27 people. Men, women, teenagers. Different races, different ages. I recognized every single face from my dreams. "Tell me their names," the older agent said. He had the weathered face of someone who'd seen things he couldn't explain. I couldn't. But I remembered their messages, their desperate pleas, the way they'd looked at me like I was their last hope. "These people vanished without a trace," the agent continued. "But here's what makes them special. Not a single person reported them missing. No family members, no friends, no employers, no social media history. It's as if these people were surgically removed from the world's memory." The younger agent, a woman with sharp eyes, pulled out another folder. "We're not the Missing Persons Bureau, Ms. Reed. We're Division 13. We track people who are erased while they're still alive, walking around, desperate for someone to see them." "That's impossible," I whispered. "You're dreaming of them because you're sensitive to it. Whatever's causing the erasures, you can still perceive the victims. That makes you valuable." She slid a business card across the table. "The FBI has a facility in Richmond. We call it the Memory Project. If you want to understand what's happening to you, and maybe help these people, we'd like you to join us." I looked at the photographs again. 27 strangers who'd trusted me with their final memories. I accepted the job the next morning. I should have asked more questions first. The Division 13 facility didn't look like a government building. It occupied the 3rd floor of an old tobacco warehouse on Carey Street, the kind of place that had been converted into trendy lofts and coffee shops. You'd walk right past it unless you knew the specific door between a vintage bookstore and a Thai restaurant. Agent Holloway, the older man who'd recruited me, met me at the entrance. No metal detectors, no security checkpoint. Just a service elevator that descended instead of going up, despite the button showing a 3. "The basement goes down 4 levels, Holloway explained as the elevator rattled downward. "Each level handles different classifications of erasure events. You'll be working on level 2 with the active cases." The doors opened onto a hallway that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. Fluorescent panels lined the ceiling, but half of them were dead, creating pockets of shadow between pools of harsh light. Dozens of filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled with dates going back to 1952. Holloway led me past offices where agents sat hunched over desks covered in photographs and handwritten notes. No computers, no digital screens, Everything was analog. Typewriters, physical files, corkboards covered in red string connecting faces to locations to dates. "You'll understand why soon enough," Holloway said, noticing my confusion. "Digital records don't hold up when someone gets erased. The data corrupts. Files delete themselves. We learned that the hard way in the 80s. He stopped at a desk where a woman was organizing dozens of Polaroid photographs into neat rows. She had dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail and wore a cardigan despite the basement's stale warmth. When she looked up, her eyes had the same tired quality I'd seen in Dr. Whitmore, the look of someone carrying knowledge they couldn't share. "Harper Reed, need Agent Nora Vance. She'll be your partner." Nora stood and shook my hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike. "Welcome to the memory business. Holloway brief you on the protocols?" "Not yet," I said. She pulled out a worn notebook from her desk drawer and flipped it open. The pages were covered in cramped handwriting, some entries crossed out and rewritten multiple times. "These aren't optional. People who ignore them don't last long here." Holloway moved toward the hallway. "I'll leave you two to it. Vance knows the drill." Nora waited until his footsteps faded before speaking. "Protocol 1. Every morning you document 3 personal facts about yourself in your designated journal. Full name, birthday, and 1 memory from childhood. Write it by hand. If you can't remember how to spell your own name, you report to medical immediately." She pointed to a locked cabinet behind her desk. "Your journal stays here when you leave. Never take it home." "Why would I forget my own name?" I asked. "Because proximity to erasure cases creates bleed-through. You spend enough time around people who are disappearing from reality, and sometimes you start slipping too." She turned a page in her notebook. "Protocol 2. Never learn a victim's birthday. Not the day, not the month. If they volunteer it, you change the subject. If it's in their file, you skip that section." "The woman who recruited me mentioned something about birthdays," I said, remembering the recruitment meeting. Nora's expression hardened. "That was a test. If you'd asked about that detail, they wouldn't have hired you. People who obsess over the pattern accelerate their own erasure." She continued down her list. "Protocol 3. You carry an analog watch at all times, wind it daily. If you check your watch and can't remember winding it that morning, you leave the building and don't come back for 72 hours. I noticed she wore 2 watches, 1 on each wrist. Protocol 4. When investigating active cases, you work in pairs, never alone. If your partner starts to feel thin to you, like you could look right through them, you immediately escort them to medical and file a code silver report. Has that happened?" I asked. Nora's jaw tightened. 3 times in the 2 years I've been here. Once to my previous partner." She closed the notebook. "The last 2 protocols I'll explain once you've processed the first 4. Right now, I need to show you something." She unlocked a drawer and pulled out a file marked Reid H. Intake Evaluation. Inside were the photographs from my recruitment, but there were more now. 43 faces. "You dreamed of 16 more people in the 3 days since Holloway contacted you," Nora said. "That's highly unusual. Most sensitives like you average 2 or 3 a month." I stared at the new photographs. I remembered each dream, each desperate face. "They're accelerating," Nora said quietly. "Whatever causes the erasures, it's happening more frequently now. We need to figure out why before." She stopped mid-sentence, staring at something behind me. I turned. The hallway was empty. "What is it?" I asked. Nora's face had gone pale. "Did you see someone just now?" "Standing right there." "No, there's nobody. There was a man. I saw him. She grabbed her notebook, hands shaking as she flipped through pages. Tall, glasses, gray hair. He waved at me. The temperature in the basement seemed to drop. Nora. She kept flipping pages, faster now, searching for something. I know him. I know him, but I can't. She looked up at me, eyes wide with fear. Harper. I can't remember his name. Nora pressed both palms against her temples, eyes squeezed shut. I worked with him. I know I did. There are gaps in my memory, like someone cut pieces out with scissors. I grabbed her shoulder. Protocol 4. We need to get you to medical. No. She shook her head violently. Not yet. I'm documenting this first. She seized a pen and started writing in her notebook, her handwriting becoming increasingly frantic and illegible. Gray hair, glasses, maybe 6'2", wore a wedding ring. He drank his coffee with too much sugar. He had a daughter in college. What was her name? Sarah? Emma? Nora, stop! His desk was 3 rows over, next to the water cooler. I can see his desk, Harper. I can picture exactly where it was. Tears were forming in her eyes. Why can't I remember his name? I looked down the hallway where she'd seen the man. The filing cabinets seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions, and I noticed something strange. One cabinet had no label. The drawer pulls looked older than the others, and dust covered the top surface like nobody had touched it in years. Was his desk near that cabinet? I pointed. Nora followed my gaze and her breathing quickened. Yes, right next to it. He always complained about the cold draft from that section. She stood abruptly. I need to check the personnel files. She moved to a different cabinet labeled Division 13, Active Roster, and yanked open the top drawer. Her fingers flew through manila folders, each one containing a photograph and basic information on current agents. I counted maybe 40 files total. He's not here, she whispered. How is he not here? Maybe he transferred, I suggested, though even I didn't believe it. You don't transfer out of Division 13. You either retire or... She didn't finish the sentence. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the hallway. Agent Holloway appeared, moving quickly toward us. Vance, you need to come with me. Now. Did we have another agent? Nora demanded. Tall gray hair worked in this section? Holloway's expression remained neutral, but I caught something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or fear. Medical. Right now. That's an order. You saw him too, Nora said. I know you did. Walk with me. Holloway took her by the elbow, gently but firmly guiding her down the hallway. He glanced back at me. Reed, you're coming too. You need to see this part. Medical occupied a small room at the end of level 2, barely larger than a doctor's examination office. A woman in her 60s sat at a desk surrounded by filing cabinets and what looked like hundreds of Polaroid photographs taped to every available wall surface. She wore thick-rimmed glasses and had the meticulous appearance of a librarian. Dr. Yun, Holloway said, Agent Vance is experiencing memory inconsistencies. Dr. Young gestured for Nora to sit in the chair opposite her desk. Describe what you can't remember. Nora went through it again. The man in the hallway, the gaps in her memory, the desk that she could visualize but not connect to a person. As she spoke, Dr. Yun pulled out a 3-ring binder and flipped through page after page of what looked like organizational charts. Here, Dr. Yun finally said, pointing to a spot on one of the charts. Does this help? The spot was blank. Just an empty box in a diagram that showed the relationships between different agents in Division 13. Names and lines connected everyone, except for this one hollow space. Someone should be there, Nora breathed. If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. It helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. Dr. Young nodded slowly. His name was Agent Thomas Brennan. 54 years old. Worked here for 11 years. He started experiencing bleed-through 6 months ago. Mild at first. Forgetting to wind his watch, skipping words when writing reports. We put him on modified duty. She pulled out a file from her desk. Inside were photographs of a man matching Nora's description, but in each photo he looked slightly off, faded almost, like the film had been overexposed. 3 weeks ago, Thomas missed his morning documentation. When we found him, he couldn't remember his daughter's name. By the end of that day, he'd forgotten where he lived. We put him in observation. Dr. Yun removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly. 4 days ago, I came to check on him, and the observation room was empty. Not just empty of Thomas, empty of any sign he'd ever been there. The bed had dust on it like nobody had slept in it for months. Where is he now? I asked. Still here, walking these halls, trying to make people see him. But every day, fewer people can. Dr. Young looked at Nora. You're experiencing Category 2 bleed-through. It's treatable if we catch it early. But you need to follow the advanced protocols now. Holloway spoke up. Reed needs to know Protocol 5 and 6 anyway. Better she learns now. Dr. Yun pulled out 2 laminated cards and handed one to each of us. The text was simple, printed in stark black letters. Protocol 5. If you experience more than 3 memory inconsistencies in a single week, you must work exclusively from the archive room on level 4. No field work, no victim contact. Protocol 6. Every Friday at 3 p.m., you attend anchoring session in Conference Room B. Attendance is mandatory. Missing 2 consecutive sessions results in immediate termination. What's an anchoring session? I asked. You'll find out Friday, Holloway said. Right now, Vance needs to start her treatment protocol. You'll be working alone until she's cleared. Protocol 4 says we work in pairs, I protested. Correct, which is why I'm assigning you to Shadow Agent Keller today. He's investigating a Category 3 erasure in Church Hill. Holloway checked his watch. He's leaving in 20 minutes. Get your field kit from equipment. I looked at Nora. She was staring at Thomas Brennan's photograph with an expression that mixed grief and terror. Will she be okay? I asked Dr. Yun. That depends on how strong her anchors are. Family, friends, important memories. The erasure phenomenon targets people who are already partially forgotten, isolated individuals, loners, people without strong social connections. Agent Vance has been careful to maintain her anchors. She paused. But this job makes that difficult. You start seeing everyone as a potential erasure case. You pull away from relationships to protect yourself. Or to protect them, Nora added quietly. Dr. Yoon handed me a small business card with just a phone number printed on it. If you start experiencing any symptoms, memory gaps, feeling thin, trouble remembering basic facts about yourself, you call this number immediately, day or night. I pocketed the card and turned to leave, but Nora called out to me. Harper, wait. She pulled a Polaroid camera from her desk drawer and took my photograph. The image developed slowly, and she wrote my name across the bottom in careful block letters. Just in case. So I remember you tomorrow, I left medical and headed toward equipment, trying not to look at the unmarked filing cabinet that used to sit next to Thomas Brennan's desk, the cabinet that nobody else seemed to notice anymore. Equipment was a converted storage closet that smelled like old leather and gun oil. A woman with close-cropped blonde hair handed me a canvas messenger bag without looking up from her inventory sheet. "First field assignment?" she asked. "Yes." "Cameras in the side pocket. 3 rolls of film. The tape recorder uses standard cassettes. You'll find blanks in the front section. Notepad and pens. Spare batteries. Salt." I blinked. "Salt? Don't ask me. Half the shit in these kits is superstition, but Holloway insists." She finally looked at me. "You're working with Keller, right? He's solid. Listen to what he tells you." Agent Keller was waiting by the service elevator, a compact man in his early 40s, wearing a rumpled dress shirt and carrying a battered leather briefcase. He had the weather-beaten face of someone who spent more time outside than in basement offices. "Harper Reed?" He shook my hand. "Marcus Keller. Heard you're sensitive. That'll be useful today." We rode the elevator up in silence. When the doors opened onto street level, the afternoon sunlight felt almost aggressive after the basement's artificial dimness. Keller's car was parked 2 blocks away, a faded blue Toyota that had seen better decades. "We're heading to Church Hill," he explained as we drove east on Broad Street. "Got a call this morning from a landlord who's confused about a rental property. Says he's got a tenant paying rent on a unit he doesn't remember renting out. How is that possible? It's not. But the checks keep appearing in his account. Same amount, same day, every month. When he tried to visit the property, he couldn't find the right door. Keller turned onto 25th Street, navigating the narrow roads lined with 19th century row houses. That's textbook Category 3. The victim is fading but hasn't fully erased yet. They still occupy physical space, still interact with the world, but people's minds can't quite process them. We parked near Libby Hill Park, where you could see the James River winding through the city below. The house in question sat on a steep side street, a 3-story brick building divided into apartments, its facade painted a fading yellow. Keller pulled out his briefcase and removed a thick file folder. Tenant's name is David Sutter. 41 years old, works as a freelance graphic designer. No family in the area. Parents deceased, never married. He showed me a photograph that looked like it had been printed from a driver's license database. The image was strangely difficult to focus on. My eyes kept wanting to slide away from the man's features. "Feel that?" Keller asked. "The photo's blurry," I said. "No, it's perfectly sharp. Your brain just doesn't want to process it. That's an erasure signature." He closed the folder. "We need to document as much as we can while he's still anchored enough to photograph. After that, he'll slip through the cracks completely." The landlord met us at the front door. A nervous man in his 60s who kept checking a clipboard like it might provide answers. "I don't understand what's happening. I own 6 units in this building. I should only have 5 tenants, but there are 6 mailboxes and someone's living in." He trailed off, staring at the row of buzzers beside the door. "Show us," Keller said. The landlord led us up 2 flights of stairs to the 3rd floor. 4 apartment doors lined the hallway, but when I looked closely, I could see something wrong with the spacing. There should have been more room between units 3 and 4. The hallway felt compressed, like someone had removed a section and pushed the remaining pieces together. "It should be right here," the landlord said, gesturing at the blank wall between the doors. "But I can't. I know there's a door. I've been collecting rent for months." Keller pulled the salt from his field kit and poured a thin line along the baseboard where the wall met the floor. Nothing happened at first. Then, slowly, the paint seemed to shimmer, and a door handle materialized, brass, tarnished, with a deadbolt above it. "What the hell?" the landlord whispered. "Go back downstairs," Keller told him. "We'll handle this." The landlord didn't argue. His footsteps echoed quickly down the stairwell. Keller knocked on the door. "Mr. Sutter, Division 13, FBI. We need to speak with you." No response. But I heard something, a faint sound, like someone crying, or maybe laughing. It was hard to tell which. "Can we just go in?" I asked. "Not without permission or a warrant. Erase your victims still have rights." Keller knocked again. "Mr. Sutter, we're here to help. We know what's happening to you." The door opened 6 inches, stopped by a chain lock. A man's face appeared in the gap, or at least I thought it was a face. My eyes kept losing focus, sliding away to examine the door frame or the hallway wallpaper instead. When I forced myself to look directly at him, I could make out general features. Thin, pale, with dark circles under his eyes that might have been exhaustion, or might have been bruises. "You can see me," David Sutter said. His voice sounded distant, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "You can actually see me?" "Yes," Keller said calmly. "We're from a federal agency that specializes in cases like yours." "May we come in?" The chain rattled as Sutter fumbled with it. The door swung open. The apartment beyond was ordinary to the point of being generic. IKEA furniture, bare walls, a kitchenette visible through an archway. But something was deeply wrong with the space. The afternoon light coming through the windows looked gray and flacked, like it was passing through dirty water. Objects cast multiple shadows in different directions. And when I tried to gauge the apartment's dimensions, they seemed to shift depending on where I stood. David Sutter sat down heavily on a futon couch. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that advertised a concert from 2019. His feet were bare. "How long?" Keller asked, sitting across from him in a folding chair. "I don't know anymore." "Weeks? Months?" Sutter ran his hands through his hair. "I started noticing things going wrong last summer. Clients would email asking who I was, even though we'd worked together for years. My sister stopped returning my calls. I went to Thanksgiving at my aunt's house, and they didn't recognize me at the door. Thought I was selling something. I pulled out my notepad and started writing, but the pen felt strange in my hand, heavier than it should be, or maybe lighter. The ink came out gray instead of blue. "When did you last eat?" Keller asked. "Yesterday, I think. I went to the grocery store on Broad Street, but they wouldn't let me check out. The cashier kept looking past me like I wasn't standing right there with my cart." Sutter's voice cracked. "I took the food anyway. Just walked out. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even saw me leave." Keller pulled out his camera, a Polaroid, same as the one Nora had used. "I need to take your photograph. It's important for our records." "Will it help?" Sutter asked desperately. "Can you fix this?" "We're going to try." The camera's flash filled the room with bright white light. When the image developed, it showed the couch and the wall behind it, but the space where David Sutter sat was empty. Just a slight blur in the air, like heat shimmer above summer asphalt. Keller studied the photograph with a grim expression. "Category 3 is progressing to Category 4. We need to get him to the facility." "What happens at Category 4? I asked. Before Keller could answer, Sutter stood abruptly. "I can't leave. This is the only place where I still exist. If I go outside, I'll disappear completely. That's not how it works, Keller said. Staying isolated is what accelerates the erasure. You need anchors, people who know you, who remember you. We can help provide that. Nobody remembers me. Sutter's voice rose to a shout, but it sounded muffled, like he was yelling through a pillow. My own sister forgot my name. My clients deleted my contact information. I'm disappearing and nobody cares enough to notice. The light in the apartment flickered. The shadows on the wall began moving independently of their sources. Keller stood slowly. Harper, get ready to move. This is about to escalate. What's happening? I backed toward the door. He's losing cohesion. When victims reach emotional breaking points, their erasure can cascade rapidly. Keller kept his voice steady. Mr. Sutter, I need you to stay calm. We've dealt with this before. You're not alone. But Sutter wasn't listening. He was staring at his hands, watching as they began to fade, not disappearing exactly, but becoming translucent, like frosted glass. Through his palms, I could see the outline of the couch behind him. No, 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 he chanted. Not yet. I'm not ready. The air in the apartment grew thick and cold. My breath came out in visible puffs. The walls started to warp, angles becoming suggestion rather than solid geometry. I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting beneath my feet. Keller grabbed my arm. Out! Now! We backed into the hallway just as David Sutter screamed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The apartment door slammed shut, and when I looked at the wall where it had been moments before, there was nothing but unbroken paint. The door was gone. David Sutter was gone. And I was already starting to forget what his face had looked like. Keller drove us back to the facility in silence. I kept trying to remember details about David Sutter, the color of his eyes, the exact sound of his voice, but it was like trying to hold water in my fists. The harder I grasped, the faster the memories leaked away. Write down everything you remember, Keller said as we descended in the service elevator. Even the smallest details. Do it before your brain smooths over the gaps. I filled 3 pages in my notepad before we reached level 2. By the time I finished, I wasn't sure if I was recording memories or creating them. Had Sutter been wearing a blue shirt or gray? Had he mentioned his sister or his aunt first? The facts were dissolving like sugar in hot water. Nora was back at her desk when we arrived, organizing files with precise movements. She looked up when she saw me and held up a Polaroid photograph. My face, with my name written underneath in her handwriting. Still remember you, she said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. That's progress. How are you feeling? I asked. Dr. Yun says I'm stabilizing. The memory gaps haven't gotten worse. She tapped her notebook. I've been documenting everything 3 times a day instead of just mornings. It helps. Keller handed her the photograph from Sutter's apartment, the one showing an empty couch. Category 3 went to Category 4 during the interview. Complete erasure event at approximately 2:47 p.m. Nora studied the blank photograph and added it to a file that was disturbingly thick. That's the 5th one this month. They're accelerating. I know. Keller rubbed his face tiredly. Holloway's calling an emergency briefing Monday morning. We need to figure out why the frequency is increasing. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:52 p.m. What happens at the anchoring session? Both of them exchanged a look. You'll see, Nora said. It's easier to experience than explain. Conference room B was larger than I expected, with a long table that could seat 20 people. When I arrived at exactly 3 p.m., 12 agents were already present, sitting in chairs arranged in a circle. I recognized Dr. Yun and Agent Holloway, but the others were unfamiliar. Nora arrived 30 seconds after me and took the seat beside mine. "Just follow everyone's lead," she whispered, "and be honest. That's the most important part." Holloway stood at the head of the circle. "Welcome to Friday Anchoring. We have a new member today, Agent Harper Reed. Harper, the purpose of this session is simple. We remind each other that we exist. We reinforce our connections to each other and to reality itself." He sat down, completing the circle. "Standard format: name, age, one personal fact, and one thing you did this week that proves you're still connected to the world outside this facility. I'll start." He cleared his throat. "My name is Richard Holloway. I'm 58 years old. I've been married for 32 years to a woman named Janet, who tolerates my strange work hours. This week I attended my grandson's soccer game in Glen Allen and embarrassed him by cheering too loud." A few people smiled at that. The tension in the room eased slightly. The woman to Holloway's right went next. "Eleanor Vasquez, 43. I have a scar on my left knee from a skateboarding accident when I was 16. This week I had dinner with my college roommate who still calls me El and still tells the same terrible jokes." Around the circle it went, each person offering fragments of their life, names, ages, memories, connections. Some details were mundane: favorite foods, childhood pets, embarrassing moments. Others were more significant: births, deaths, marriages, divorces. When it came to Nora, she took a deep breath. "Nora Vance, 35 years old. I grew up in Charlottesville, and I still hate the taste of orange juice because my mother made me drink it every morning for 18 years. This week I called my brother in Denver, and we talked for 40 minutes about absolutely nothing important. And it was the best conversation I've had in months." Then it was my turn. Everyone looked at me expectantly. "Harper Reed," I began. "I'm 29. What could I say? What personal fact felt solid enough to matter? I have a birthmark on my right shoulder blade that looks like a coffee stain. My father used to call it my cafe mark when I was little. The memory felt suddenly precious, like something I needed to guard carefully. This week, I joined an FBI division I didn't know existed, and I watched a man disappear from reality while he was begging someone to remember him." The room went quiet. "That counts," Holloway said gently. "Connection doesn't have to be comfortable. It just has to be real." After everyone had spoken, Dr. Yun stood and distributed small index cards. "Write your name, birthday, and the name of one person who would notice if you disappeared. Keep the card with you at all times. If you ever look at it and can't read your own handwriting, report to medical immediately." I filled out my card. Harper Reed, March 17th, 1996. Dr. Patricia Whitmore, my therapist. The person who'd noticed my dreams and reported them. The only one who knew the full truth about what was happening to me. "Now, the difficult part," Holloway said. "We're going to spend the next hour discussing what we know about the erasure phenomenon. This information doesn't leave this room. Some of it is classified above your current clearance level, Harper, but you need to understand what you're dealing with." He dimmed the lights and pulled down a projection screen. No PowerPoint presentation. Instead, he used an old overhead projector, placing transparent sheets with hand-drawn diagrams and typewritten text. Division 13 was established in 1952, Holloway began. During the Cold War, various government agencies experimented with ways to create the perfect intelligence asset. Someone who could operate without detection, who could be forgotten as soon as they left a room. Project Tether was one such experiment, The first transparency showed a document stamped with official seals and redaction marks. I could only make out fragments, memory suppression techniques, and targeted amnesia induction. They succeeded, Holloway continued, but not in the way they intended. The subjects didn't just become forgettable, they began to actually fade from reality. The phenomenon was contagious. People who spent too much time around the test subjects started experiencing similar effects. The project was shut down in 1959, but the damage was done. Another transparency. A map of the United States with red dots clustered around certain cities. Richmond had 3 dots. We track approximately 800 active erasure cases nationwide at any given time. The number has remained stable for decades, suggesting an equilibrium state. But in the last 6 months, we've seen a 34% increase in new cases. Something is destabilizing the balance. "What changed?" asked one of the other agents. "We don't know yet. But we have theories." Holloway placed a new transparency showing what looked like a genetic sequence. All erasure victims share certain markers, rare blood types, birth during specific astronomical events, genetic variants that affect memory formation. It's as if reality itself has trouble holding on to certain people. Nora raised her hand. "What about sensitives like Harper? Why can we still perceive people who are erasing?" Another good question without a definitive answer. Our working theory is that sensitives have a similar genetic profile to victims, but with a crucial difference. You can see the gaps that erasure creates. You're like, Holloway searched for the right words, like people who can see holes in reality that others simply step around without noticing. I thought about my dreams. 27 faces that had grown to 43 in just days. All those people desperate to be remembered. "Is there a cure?" I asked. The room fell silent again. "Not a cure," Dr. Yun said finally. "But we've discovered something important. Being remembered, truly remembered, by even one person who understands the phenomenon can re-anchor a victim to reality. That's what we do here. We document, we remember, we maintain connections. We've saved thousands of people from complete erasure." She pulled out a thick binder and opened it to a random page. Photographs, dozens of them, each with handwritten notes underneath. Names, dates, personal details. An archive of people who might otherwise have vanished completely. This is why we use analog systems. Why we write everything by hand. Digital files corrupt and delete themselves when someone erases, but physical records persist. As long as we keep these files, keep these photographs, keep speaking these names, the victims remain anchored. Partial erasure instead of complete. "That's why you took my photo," I said to Nora. She nodded. "If I start to slip, someone in this room will remember me. Someone will speak my name during an anchoring session, and that connection might be enough to pull me back." Holloway turned on the lights. "Questions?" I had dozens, but one rose above the others. If being remembered by one person can save someone, why did David Sutter disappear? We were right there. We saw him. "Because he'd already given up," Keller said quietly from his seat against the wall. When victims lose hope, when they stop believing anyone will remember them, the erasure accelerates beyond our ability to intervene. Emotional state matters. Will matters. Connection matters. I thought about Sutter's last words. "Nobody remembers me. My own sister forgot my name." "So we're not just investigators," I said slowly. "We're anchors." "Exactly," Holloway replied. "Welcome to Division 13, Agent Reed." Your job isn't just to document erasure cases, it's to be the one person who refuses to forget. That night, I dreamed of Thomas Brennan. He stood in the Division 13 basement, exactly where Nora had seen him. But in my dream, the hallway stretched infinitely in both directions. Filing cabinets lined the walls like sentinels, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the rhythmic clacking of typewriter keys. "You're different from the others," Thomas said. His voice sounded clearer than David Sutter's had, more present. "You can still see me even here." "Where is here?" I asked. "The space between being remembered and being forgotten. Most people who dream of us only see fragments, faces without context, voices without words. But you see everything." He moved closer, and I noticed details I shouldn't have been able to perceive in a dream. The frayed edge of his collar, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his wedding ring had worn a groove into his finger. "How many of us have you dreamed about?" he asked. 43. The number keeps growing." Thomas nodded slowly. "It's going to get worse. The phenomenon is accelerating, and you're at the center of it." "What do you mean?" He pointed down the hallway, and I saw them. Dozens of people standing between the filing cabinets, all of them watching me with desperate eyes. Men, women, teenagers, elderly. Some I recognized from my previous dreams. Others were new faces that I was seeing for the first time. "We're drawn to you," Thomas said. "Sensitives like you are rare. Most people in Division 13 can only perceive victims who are still partially anchored. But you," he gestured to the crowd, "you can see people who've been completely erased, people who exist now only in the spaces between memories." One of the figures stepped forward, a young woman with red hair tied back in a practical braid. I recognized her instantly. The first person I'd ever dreamed about, months before Division 13 recruited me. "My name is Caroline Hendricks," she said. "I was a nurse at VCU Medical Center. I worked the overnight shift in the emergency room for 7 years. I had an apartment on Floyd Avenue. I went to the same coffee shop every morning and ordered the same drink, medium latte with oat milk." Her voice cracked. "Nobody remembers any of that now. But I'm still here, Harper. Somewhere. And I need you to prove it." The dream shifted, and I was standing in a different room, one I'd never seen before. It looked like an old laboratory from the 1950s. Metal tables, glass beakers, walls lined with filing cabinets and technical equipment. The air smelled like formaldehyde and burnt paper. Thomas appeared beside me. "This is where it started. Project Tether. They brought test subjects here, people who fit the profile. Orphans, drifters, anyone without strong social connections. They wanted to make them forgettable." He opened one of the filing cabinets, and I saw rows of folders, each one containing a photograph and basic biographical information. But the photographs were all blank, just empty rectangles where faces should have been. "The experiments worked too well," Thomas continued. "They created a feedback loop. The more someone was forgotten, the more forgettable they became, until they started erasing from reality itself. And the phenomenon spread. It became hereditary, genetic, passed down through bloodlines." "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because I've been here long enough to remember things that everyone else forgot. Information erases along with people, Harper. Records disappear, witnesses forget. But those of us who are already erased, we can still access the memories. We exist in the gaps." The laboratory began to dissolve, walls becoming translucent, furniture fading into suggestion. I felt myself being pulled back toward consciousness, but Thomas grabbed my arm. His touch was cold, but solid. Listen carefully. The pattern isn't random. They're not just erasing. They're being harvested. What does that mean? Someone is using the phenomenon, targeting specific people, and the number of victims is increasing because... I woke up. My apartment was dark, except for the digital clock on my nightstand, 3:23 a.m. I lay there for several minutes, trying to hold on to the dream's details before they slipped away. But unlike normal dreams, these memories remained sharp and clear. I grabbed my phone and called the number Dr. Yun had given me. She answered on the second ring, sounding completely awake. "Agent Reed, what are you experiencing?" "I need to come to the facility. Now. I dreamed something important." "Can it wait until morning?" "No, I was already pulling on clothes. I think someone is deliberately causing the erasures." 20 minutes later, I was descending in the service elevator while Dr. Yun waited at the bottom. The basement felt different at night. Colder, more oppressive. The shadows between the fluorescent lights seemed deeper. "Tell me everything," Dr. Yun said, leading me to her office. I described the dream in detail. Thomas Brennan, Caroline Hendricks, the laboratory, the filing cabinets with blank photographs. When I mentioned Thomas's final words about harvesting, Dr. Yun's expression darkened. "That's a theory we've considered but never been able to prove," she said. She pulled out a key and unlocked the bottom drawer of her desk, removing a folder marked with a red stripe across the cover. "This is classified information. Holloway would be angry that I'm showing you, but if what you're describing is accurate, we may not have time for proper protocols." Inside the folder were dozens of documents: old Project Tether files, personnel records, budget allocations. Most of the text had been redacted, but Dr. Yun pointed to one particular memo dated March 1959. Project Tether was officially shut down, but some researchers believed they could refine the process. Instead of making people forgettable, they wanted to harvest the erased individual's consciousness, use them as intelligence assets who could operate completely undetected. "That's insane," I whispered. "It gets worse. We've found evidence that some of the original researchers are still alive, still working. They've been tracking erasure victims for decades, waiting for people who fit the specific genetic and astronomical markers. And in the last 6 months, they've become more aggressive." She showed me a map covered with colored pins, similar to the one Holloway had displayed during the anchoring session, but with additional markings. Clusters of pins formed patterns across Virginia, concentrated around Richmond, Charlottesville, and Alexandria. "These are the locations of recent erasures. Notice anything?" I studied the map. The pins weren't random. They formed rough circles around specific points. They're centered on something. Government facilities, old Cold War installations that were supposedly decommissioned. Dr. Yun tapped a pin in Richmond. "This one is less than 5 miles from where we're sitting right now." "Someone is operating out of these facilities?" "We don't know for certain, but the correlation is too strong to ignore." She closed the folder. "Your dream about the laboratory, can you describe any identifying features? Anything that might help us locate it?" I closed my eyes, trying to recall details. There was a number painted on the wall. Block letters, Building C7, and the cabinets had labels, dates ranging from 1952 to 1959. Dr. Yun pulled out a different file, this one containing architectural blueprints. "These are layouts of the original Project Tether facility. It was located in a bunker system beneath what's now a commercial district in Henrico County." She traced her finger across the blueprint. Building C7 was the main laboratory. It was supposed to have been sealed in 1960. Supposed to have been, I repeated. She met my eyes. Harper, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Have you been experiencing any memory gaps? Any difficulty remembering basic facts about yourself? No. Why? Because your sensitivity is increasing at a rate we've never documented before. Most sensitives dream of 2 or 3 victims per month. You're seeing dozens, and now you're accessing information that should be completely erased. That level of perception usually comes with a cost. I thought about the index card in my wallet. Harper Reed. March 17th, 1996. Dr. Patricia Whitmore. The facts still felt solid, real. I'm fine, I said. For now. But we need to be careful. The more connected you become to the erased individuals, the more you risk becoming like them. She stood and walked to a wall covered in photographs, the same ones I'd seen before, hundreds of faces maintained in Division 13's analog archives. Every person in these photos is still partially anchored because we remember them. But if you start to blur the line between documenting victims and becoming one yourself. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. What do we do about the facility? I asked. I'll brief Holloway first thing in the morning. We'll need to organize a proper investigation team. She checked her watch. It's almost 4 a.m. You should go home, get some rest before your shift. But I knew I wouldn't sleep, not after everything I'd learned. As I rode the elevator back up to street level, I pulled out my phone and looked at my recent calls. Dr. Whitmore's number was there, exactly where it should be. I tapped it, needing to hear a voice that existed completely outside Division 13's strange reality. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Her recorded message played, professional, warm, exactly as I remembered it. Dr. Whitmore, it's Harper. I paused, suddenly uncertain what to say. I wanted to make sure you still remember who I am. Call me back when you can. I hung up and stared at the phone. A horrible thought occurred to me. What if Dr. Yun was wrong? What if I wasn't experiencing bleed-through from prolonged exposure? What if I'd always been one of the people who was supposed to be erased, and Division 13 recruiting me had just delayed the inevitable? I pulled out the index card and read my own handwriting. Harper Reed. March 17th, 1996. Dr. Patricia Whitmore. The words looked right. They felt right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was reading facts about a stranger. Someone I'd known once, but was slowly forgetting. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Building C7 is still active. They're planning something for Sunday. Come alone. TB. Thomas Brennan. Somehow texting me from whatever space he occupied between existence and erasure. I looked at the message timestamp. 4:07 a.m. Sunday was 2 days away. I had 48 hours to figure out what was happening before whatever Thomas warned about came to pass. And I had to do it while maintaining my own anchors, my own connections to reality. I drove back to my apartment as dawn began painting the sky gray above the James River. The city was waking up around me. Early morning joggers, delivery trucks, people heading to opening shifts. All of them solid, real, remembered. I parked and sat in my car, watching them pass. How many of them were one bad day away from slipping through the cracks? How many carried the genetic markers, the astronomical coincidences, the social isolation that made them vulnerable? How many of them would I dream about tomorrow night? I didn't tell anyone about the text message. Saturday morning, I showed up for my shift like normal, documented my 3 facts in my journal, and spent the day reviewing old case files with Nora, She seemed better, sharper, more present. The Polaroid photograph of me remained taped to her desk, but she didn't need to check it as often. "You seem distracted," she said around noon, sliding a file across the table. "Just tired." "The dreams are getting more intense." She nodded sympathetically. "That happened to me in my first month." "Your brain is adjusting to perceiving things most people can't see. It gets easier." But it wasn't getting easier. It was getting worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces, heard voices, felt the desperate pull of people who existed somewhere between memory and oblivion. At 5 p.m., I clocked out and drove to the public library on Franklin Street. If I was going to find Building C7, I needed information that Division 13's files didn't contain. The library's local history section had archived maps and documents about Henrico County's development during the Cold War era. An elderly librarian helped me locate a collection of aerial photographs from the 1960s. I spread them across a reading table, searching for anything that matched the facility layouts Dr. Yun had shown me. There, a cluster of structures near what was now a shopping center off Parham Road. The photographs showed several buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with access roads that no longer existed on current maps. One building was labeled C7 in faded ink on the photograph's margin. I used my phone to compare the old photographs with current satellite imagery. The surface structures were gone, replaced by a Target and several chain restaurants. But the property lines were wrong. There was a gap, an empty lot behind the shopping center that was too large to be just unused space. Underground. The facility had gone underground. I left the library and drove north on Parham Road as evening settled over Richmond. The shopping center was busy with Saturday traffic. Families doing weekend errands, teenagers hanging around the food court entrance. Normal life, unaware of what might be happening beneath their feet. The empty lot behind the Target was surrounded by a chain-link fence with faded, "No trespassing" signs. Weeds grew thick between cracked asphalt, and several ventilation grates poked up through the concrete like mechanical mushrooms. Nobody was around. I parked at the far edge of the Target lot and waited for full darkness. Thomas's message said to come alone, but every protocol I'd learned at Division 13 screamed that this was dangerous. I should call Holloway, bring backup, follow proper procedure. But what if the person harvesting erasure victims had connections inside Division 13? What if telling anyone would tip them off? At 9:30 p.m., I climbed the fence. The lot was larger than it appeared from the road, maybe 2 acres of abandoned concrete and industrial debris. I followed the ventilation grates, trying to map the underground facility's layout. They formed a rough rectangle, suggesting the bunker below was substantial. Near the center of the lot, I found what I was looking for: a concrete structure about 4 feet tall, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. It looked like an old utility access, the kind used for underground maintenance. The metal door was secured with a padlock that had rusted through decades ago. I pulled on the door. It groaned but opened, revealing a ladder descending into absolute darkness. The air rising from below smelled like damp concrete and something else, something organic and wrong, like meat left too long in a warm room. I clicked on my phone's flashlight and started climbing down. The ladder descended 30 feet before reaching a concrete floor. I was standing in a narrow corridor with walls painted institutional green, the paint peeling in long strips. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping condensation that had formed rust stains on the floor. Emergency lighting strips still lined the walls, but only half of them worked, creating alternating sections of dim light and shadow. This was it. Building C7. The corridor branched in 2 directions. I went left, following the working lights, my footsteps echoing off the concrete. Doors lined the hallway, most of them locked, their small windows dark. Through one window, I saw what looked like an old examination room with a metal table and cracked leather restraints. The next room contained filing cabinets, hundreds of them arranged in neat rows. I tried the door, locked. A sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the facility. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too regular, too measured, like someone walking without needing to think about it. I ducked into an alcove as the footsteps grew closer. A figure emerged from the shadows. A man in a dark suit, walking with that strange mechanical rhythm. As he passed under one of the working lights, I saw his face clearly. David Sutter, the man who disappeared from his Church Hill apartment, the Category 4 erasure case. He was walking through the facility like he belonged here, but his movements were all wrong, too smooth, too coordinated, like a puppet operated by someone who'd studied human motion, but never quite mastered it. He walked past my hiding spot without noticing me and disappeared around a corner. I waited 30 seconds before following. The corridor opened into a larger room, what must have been the main laboratory Thomas had shown me in my dream. The metal tables were still there, the glass beakers, the equipment. But now the room was active. 6 people stood around the perimeter of the room, all of them moving with that same mechanical gait. I recognized 3 faces from my dreams. Erasure victims I'd documented in Division 13's files. They were arranging objects on the tables. Photographs, personal belongings, handwritten notes. Items that must have belonged to them before they erased. At the center of the room stood someone I didn't recognize. An elderly man with silver hair, wearing a white lab coat stained with something dark. He was examining a clipboard, making notes with a pen that scratched loudly in the silence. "Excellent progress," he said, his voice carrying an accent I couldn't place. "Subject 73 is showing full compliance. Subject 81 needs recalibration, but that's to be expected." One of the erased people, a woman with dark hair that might have been Caroline Hendricks, turned toward the man. "All items cataloged, ready for transfer." Transfer. The elderly man set down his clipboard and pulled out what looked like a modified Polaroid camera. But instead of taking photographs, he aimed it at each of the erased people in turn. When he pressed the button, nothing seemed to happen. No flash, no mechanical whir. But each person he aimed at became slightly more translucent, like they were fading even further from reality. "Harvesting complete," he announced. "Tomorrow's ceremony will proceed as planned. We'll have enough essence to maintain the primary consciousness for another decade." Primary consciousness, essence. The words didn't make sense, but the implication was horrifying. Someone coughed behind me. I spun around. Thomas Brennan stood there, looking more solid than he had in my dream. He pressed a finger to his lips and gestured for me to follow him back down the corridor. We moved quickly and quietly until we reached a small room that must have been an old office. Thomas closed the door carefully. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. "You told me to. I told you to come tomorrow, Sunday, after they finish the harvest." He ran his hands through his hair. "They're collecting us, Harper. The erased people, using some kind of technology to extract what's left of our consciousness and store it. For what purpose? The researchers from Project Tether. They figured out how to sustain themselves using the erased. Every person who gets fully harvested extends their lifespan by months or years. They've been doing this for decades, creating and then collecting erasure victims like crops. How many people? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands over the years. That's why the phenomenon seemed stable. They were managing it, controlling the numbers to avoid detection. But now they're desperate. The original researchers are dying, and they need more essence to survive. That's why the erasures have accelerated. We have to stop them. You can't fight them directly. They have technology you don't understand, and anyone who gets too close becomes a target for erasure. That's what happened to me. I got too close to the truth, and they marked me. He grabbed my shoulders. But you can document this. You can tell Division 13 what's happening. Holloway doesn't know about this facility, but if you show him evidence... The door burst open. David Sutter stood in the doorway, his head tilted at that strange angle, eyes completely black like pools of ink. Unauthorized personnel detected. Initiating containment protocol. Thomas pushed me toward a back door I hadn't noticed. Run. Get out of here. Don't let them mark you. What about you? I'm already gone, Harper. I've been gone for months, but you're still real. You can still stop this. He shoved me through the door as David Sutter stepped into the room. Remember me. Please, remember all of us. I ran. The corridor behind the office led to a different ladder, this one emerging in an overgrown drainage ditch half a mile from where I'd entered. I climbed out into the night air, gasping, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip my phone. I had evidence. I had information. I had 43 faces in my dreams, and now I knew why they were there. But when I tried to remember Thomas Brennan's face, tried to picture the man who just saved my life, the image was already starting to blur. I pulled out my phone and recorded a voice memo, speaking quickly. Thomas Brennan, agent at Division 13. Gray hair, glasses, wedding ring, daughter in college, drinks coffee with too much sugar, helped me in building C7, harvesting operation active, primary consciousness, essence extraction, remember, remember, remember. I played it back immediately, committing every word to memory, but I had a terrible feeling that by morning, I'd look at this recording and wonder who Thomas Brennan was, and why I'd felt the need to remember him. I drove straight to the facility and pounded on the after-hours entrance until Agent Keller opened the door. He took one look at my face and stepped aside without questions. Holloway's office, now. The basement was nearly empty on Sunday morning, just 2 agents working the overnight shift and Dr. Yun in medical. Keller made calls while I sat in Holloway's office, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. The problem was that my memories of building C7 were already fragmenting. I could remember climbing down the ladder, walking through corridors, seeing the laboratory. But the details were becoming vague, dreamlike. Had there been 6 people in that room or 7? What color was the elderly researcher's lab coat? And Thomas Brennan. God, Thomas Brennan. I knew he'd been there, knew he'd saved me. But when I tried to picture his face, all I saw was a gray blur. I pulled out my phone and played the voice memo I'd recorded. Thomas Brennan, agent at Division 13. Gray hair, glasses, wedding ring, daughter in college, drinks coffee with too much sugar. Helped me in building C7. Harvesting operation active. Primary consciousness. Essence extraction. Remember, remember, remember. My own voice sounded frantic, desperate. I played it 3 more times before Holloway arrived. He listened to the recording without interruption, his expression growing darker with each repetition. When it finished, he pulled out a file from his locked cabinet. One with a red stripe across the cover, same as the classified documents Dr. Yun had shown me. Building C7 has been on our watch list for 15 years, Holloway said. We've suspected it was still active, but every time we tried to investigate, the team members would return with no memory of finding anything unusual. The place has some kind of defense mechanism. It's real, I insisted. I saw them harvesting victims, using modified cameras to extract whatever's left of their consciousness. Dr. Yun entered the office, followed by Nora. They must have been called in early. Play the recording again, Dr. Yun requested. I did. This time, Nora went pale. Thomas Brennan, she whispered. That was my old partner's name. The one I told you about. The one who experienced bleed-through and... She stopped, looking confused. Wait. I remember him now. How do I remember him? Because Harper documented him before the erasure could complete, Dr. Yun said. The voice recording is serving as an anchor. Holloway stood and pulled down a map from the wall, the same one showing erasure patterns across Virginia. If what Reed is describing is accurate, we have approximately 4 hours before they conduct their ceremony. We need to mobilize a team. I'm coming, I said. No. His tone left no room for argument. You're a new agent who violated multiple protocols by investigating alone. You're staying here. I'm the only one who can still remember what I saw. If everyone else gets hit by that defense mechanism, you'll need someone who can... Read. Holloway's voice was firm but not unkind. You've been exposed to an active harvesting operation. That makes you compromised. Dr. Yun needs to evaluate you for contamination before you go anywhere near that facility again. Contamination. The word hung in the air like a threat. Dr. Yun gestured for me to follow her to medical. As we walked, I noticed Nora trailing behind us, her face troubled. In the examination room, Dr. Yun had me sit while she pulled out a thick binder, the same one containing organizational charts with blank spaces for erased agents. She flipped to a page near the back and pointed to a spot. This is where Thomas Brennan should appear in our records. Can you see anything? I stared at the empty box in the diagram. Slowly, very slowly, text began to appear, like invisible ink responding to heat. A name materialized. Thomas Brennan. Lines connected him to other agents, to cases, to dates. You're making him visible, Dr. Yun said quietly. Your perception is literally anchoring him back into our records. She pulled out another file, this one with my name on the tab. There's something I need to show you. Something Holloway didn't want you to see until you'd been here longer. She opened the file to reveal my intake documents. But there were other papers underneath. Older records, photocopies of documents that looked decades old. Harper Reed appeared in Project Tether's files in 1996, Dr. Yun said, the year you were born. Your birthday, March 17th, occurred during a rare astronomical alignment. Triple conjunction of Venus, Mars, and Saturn. The same alignment that marked dozens of test subjects in the original experiments. What are you saying? You were flagged as a potential erasure candidate from birth. Your parents. She hesitated. Your father died when you were 7. Your mother remarried and moved to Colorado when you were 12. According to our research, neither of them remember you clearly. They remember having a child, but the details are vague. That's not true. My mother calls me every week. We talk about... I stopped. When was the last time she'd called? What had we talked about? The memories felt slippery, unreliable. Dr. Yun showed me another document. You started experiencing the dreams 6 months ago. That's when your own erasure began. Division 13 recruited you not just because you're a sensitive. We recruited you because we were trying to save you. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the examination table. By bringing you here, by connecting you to other people who understand the phenomenon, We've been anchoring you back into reality. That's why you can see Thomas Brennan. Why you can perceive completely erased victims. You're not just observing erasure. You're existing partially in that space yourself. Nora spoke from the doorway. How long has she been erasing? Based on the progression, we estimate another 3 to 6 months before Category 4. But if Harper helps us stop the harvesting operation at Building C7, if we can disrupt the researchers' essence extraction technology, Dr. Yun met my eyes. We might be able to reverse the process, for you and for hundreds of other victims. I tried to process this. Everything I'd thought about my past, my family, my life before Division 13, how much of it was real? How much had already been erased? What about my therapist? I asked. Dr. Whitmore. She reported me to the FBI. She remembers me. Dr. Yun nodded. She's one of your anchors. We've been working with her to maintain your connection to reality. She knows more about Division 13 than most civilians. Holloway appeared in the doorway. Team is assembled. Keller's leading the raid. We move in 45 minutes. He looked at me. Reed, you're staying here under observation. That's final. But I wasn't staying. I couldn't. Those people in Building C7, the ones being harvested, controlled, used, they were me. They were what I would become if this operation continued. After Holloway left, I looked at Nora. I need your help. She studied me for a long moment. What are you thinking? They have a defense mechanism that makes people forget what they find in Building C7. But I'm already partially erased. Maybe their technology won't work on me the same way. Maybe I'm the only one who can get in there and remember what happens. That's incredibly dangerous, Dr. Yun said. More dangerous than becoming Category 4 in 6 months? More dangerous than letting them continue harvesting people? I stood. You said bringing me here was about saving me. Let me save myself. And everyone else. Nora pulled out her Polaroid camera. Then we need to document everything. Right now, before you go. She took a dozen photographs of me from different angles, writing detailed notes on each one. Harper Reed. Brown hair, green eyes. Scar above right eyebrow from childhood bike accident. Likes black coffee. Afraid of heights. Dreamed of strangers since March 2025. Details. Anchors. Proof that I existed. If you don't come back, Nora said, or if you come back and you've erased completely, these photographs will be your lifeline. We'll speak your name at every anchoring session. We'll remember you. I took one of the photographs and put it in my wallet next to the index card with Dr. Whitmore's name. I'll come back, I said, trying to sound confident. I'm harder to erase than they think. Dr. Yun handed me something, a small digital recorder, newer than the analog equipment Division 13 typically used. This is experimental technology. It's designed to record even when memory suppression is active. Keep it running the entire time you're in that facility. 45 minutes later, I followed Keller's team through the fence behind the target. 6 agents, all carrying documentation kits and wearing body cameras, though we knew the cameras probably wouldn't work properly near the harvesting equipment. Dawn was breaking over Richmond, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. The ceremony would begin soon. I climbed down the ladder into Building C7 for the second time, this time with backup. But I had a terrible feeling that backup wouldn't matter if the researchers had been waiting for someone exactly like me. Someone who could perceive the erased. Someone who was already halfway gone. The laboratory was empty when we arrived. Not abandoned. The equipment was still running. The modified cameras still humming with that strange frequency. But the elderly researcher and his harvested servants were gone. They'd known we were coming. Keller's team spread out through Building C7, documenting everything with photographs and handwritten notes. The digital recorder Dr. Yun gave me captured sounds that shouldn't exist. Whispers in empty rooms, footsteps that came from nowhere, names being called by voices that had been erased from reality. In the main laboratory, I found filing cabinets full of records. Not the blank folders from my dream, but detailed documentation of every person the researchers had harvested over 70 years. Thousands of names, photographs, personal effects. An archive of people who'd been surgically removed from the world's memory. "Harper, look at this." Nora stood beside one of the modified cameras, examining its construction. She'd pulled off the back panel, revealing circuitry that looked wrong. Organic somehow, with components that seemed to pulse with dim light. "Can we destroy them?" I asked. "Better than that. Dr. Yun will want to reverse engineer this." She pulled out her own camera and photographed every angle. "If we understand how they extract consciousness, maybe we can figure out how to restore it." Agent Keller emerged from a back corridor carrying a metal case. Found the essence storage, hundreds of vials, all labeled with dates and numbers corresponding to victim files. His expression was grim. "We need to get this to the facility immediately." The raid on Building C7 became the largest operation in Division 13's history. Over the next week, we transported every file, every photograph, every piece of equipment back to our basement headquarters. The filing cabinets lined an entire new level, Level 5, dedicated solely to re-anchoring victims. That Friday, our anchoring session ran 4 hours instead of 1. We read names from the harvested files, spoke details about people nobody else remembered. With each name, each personal fact, each memory we vocalized, something shifted. The air felt less heavy. The shadows seemed less deep. Caroline Hendricks appeared in my dreams that night, but different this time. She was smiling. "You found my file," she said. "Someone in Division 13 spoke my name today. I heard it. I felt it. I'm still here." I woke up and checked my phone. Dr. Whitmore had returned my call, her voicemail time-stamped from 3 days ago, asking if I was all right, saying she'd been thinking about me, remembering the conversations we'd had about my dreams. An anchor, reaching across the space between forgetting and being forgotten. Nora was already at her desk when I arrived for my shift. She'd taped a new photograph beside my Polaroid, Thomas Brennan's official Division 13 ID photo, recovered from the Building C7 files. His face was clear now, no longer blurred. Beneath it, she'd written, "Agent Thomas Brennan helped us remember." "Dr. Yun says the extracted essence can't be restored to individual victims," Nora told me. "But speaking their names, maintaining their files, keeping their memories alive, it creates anchor points. Partial reintegration instead of complete erasure." I pulled out my wallet and looked at my own photograph. Harper Reed. The face was still mine, the details still accurate. I wasn't disappearing anymore, or at least, the disappearance had stopped accelerating. "We saved them," I said. Nora corrected me gently. "We're saving them." Present tense. This isn't a one-time rescue. It's a commitment. Every day, every anchoring session, every time we speak a name or look at a photograph, we're fighting to keep these people tethered to reality. She handed me a new file. Inside were blank forms, waiting to be filled with details about victims we hadn't documented yet. People who were still out there, fading, desperate for someone to notice. "Ready for another week?" she asked. I thought about the 43 faces I'd dreamed about, the hundreds of names in the Building C7 files. the thousands more who'd been harvested over decades, all of them depending on people like us to remember. I opened my journal and wrote my 3 facts, same as every morning. Harper Reed, March 17th, 1996. Dr. Patricia Whitmore. Then I added a new line, works for Division 13, refuses to forget. Ready, I said.